lumber and plywood prices are going through the roof, so much so that you can't afford to buy a roof these days. I'm Dr. Bill Connerly. I'm going to explain why lumber and plywood prices have risen so high and when they're going to come down. We're going to begin by talking about the pandemic. You remember the pandemic, but let me just show lumber and plywood prices, how they've evolved since the pandemic. At first, there was a little bit of a decline when we all went into lockdown mode, but then prices have more than doubled. The focus today is lumber and plywood prices. Other building materials have also increased, but not as dramatically. So if you want to buy tile or carpet or plumbing products, you'll see higher prices than you would have seen 2 years ago, but not as spectacularly higher as lumber and plywood. Well, what happened here is that in the early stages of the lockdown, we were working remotely, those of us who could. We could not go on vacation, could not eat out in restaurants, could not go to concerts, and the federal government thought we should have checks, so money came in. As a result, people had more money in their pocket and were less available to go outside of their homes for recreation. Could not go on vacation, had trouble going to the beach, and as a result, they decided, let's build a deck, let's build a playhouse for the kids, let's build a she shed. Some of them remodeled their house and added on. That's a kind of a big do-it-yourself project, but some people are open for it. And in those early days of coping, after the worst of the pandemic, I'm talking like May, June, July of last year, demand for wood products went up, largely from do-it-yourselfers. But then late in the fall of 2020, we saw increase in housing starts. Housing starts went up, and I'll talk about why, but mostly single family home sales. The big apartment projects with steel and concrete construction, not a big impact. It was single family home housing starts. Well, why did they go up? The big thing was mortgage rates. Let's step back a little bit first, though. In this country, about 1/3 of families live in apartments, 2/3 in single family homes. The apartment dwellers, a few of them are long term apartment dwellers, but a majority of them are on a path to owning a single family home. It's a stage of life thing. The apartment dwellers are younger, getting their finances in order. We had in 2020 a small number of those dyed in the wool apartment dwellers changed their mind. They said, if we're working remotely, we want more space, let's get out of the apartment and get a single family home. But that was just small. The big change was the timing of the shift for many families from apartment living to single family home living. People who had been running the numbers and said, well, we'll be able to afford to buy a house in 2023 or 2024 or 2025, they looked at the calculations with cheap mortgages and they said, holy cow. I hope they said cow. Children are around. They said, holy cow, we can afford a house now. So let's look at those mortgage rates. Mortgage rates got down to 3% in the middle of 2020. Anything below 3.5% is very stimulative to the housing market. We used to say that about 4.5%, but things have changed as overall interest rates went down. But particularly middle and late last year, when we got low mortgage rates, people started shopping for houses. Now, they were not all shopping for new houses, but as the market for existing houses boomed, the home builder said, oh, if people want houses, we know how to build houses. And as a result, we had a big gain in single family housing starts, and that pushed up the demand. So first it was do-it-yourselfers, then it was new construction of single family houses. When prices go up, and prices obviously went up sharply, I expect a supply response. That is, I think that we're going to see the producers of lumber and plywood increase their production, and that certainly happened to a little extent. But they were limited in increasing their production in the short run. And the biggest factor was labor. There were COVID 19 fears that kept some people from looking for work. There was also some social distancing in the plants, in the mills, that limited production even when they had the workers. But labor had a couple of other challenges. One is the long term change where fewer and fewer people are interested in blue collar work. They're less interested in going to a factory or going into a construction trade. The high school counselors and teachers have said, you must go to college. And a lot of young people, especially young men, took that advice rather than going to work in a sawmill or a plywood mill. So it's been hard to get workers. And then the bonus unemployment insurance payments meant that if you lost a restaurant job, say, did you go to the mill to get a replacement? Well, you're making more with the bonus unemployment insurance than you ever made working in a restaurant. So there were some people who answered the survey and said, well, I'm not looking for work because I'm afraid of COVID-19. And then they went back to the couch playing a video game saying, why would I go to work? So there were a mix of causes causing the tight labor market. So the mills have had a real challenge increasing their production. When they have been able to increase their production, they run into a trucking shortage. Actually, not so much a trucking shortage, a truck driver shortage. The whole supply of lumber and wood products to your local store depends, first of all, on logs going from forest to mills, and then the finished product going from a mill to a distribution center, and then to your local store. And it has been tough getting things moved. So, in the short run, we have not seen a big increase in production. That will happen over time. There'll be some labor market adjustments, higher prices, higher wages for labor, and also there are some new mills that are under construction that had been started before the pandemic. In terms of brand new construction of mills, if you wanted a state of the art sawmill, you said, man, prices are so high, I ought to be able to make a lot of money in this, you'd first want to line up financing for maybe $100 million, could be $150 million, depending on whether you want the leather seats and the tinted glass in your new sawmill. But it's a big chunk of money. In normal times, it can take as long as 2 years, but we've had a change in the industry, so many pieces of equipment are on back order. And that change is the Canadian timber industry has been beset by some kind of bug that has reduced their timber production. So many wood products companies shifted to using wood from the southern forests of the United States, southern yellow pine, and they had to build new mills, and they didn't just move the old equipment. They said this is a good time to upgrade to the state-of-the-art stuff. So if you pick up the phone and you call some sawmill equipment producer and you say, hey, I'm equipping a new sawmill, you're going to learn that the equipment's on back order. We'll have some for you in maybe 3 years. So there's not going to be an instant change in capacity. We have not seen much change in production from the existing capacity. The only thing that's going to bring plywood and lumber prices down is reduced demand. But I believe we are going to get reduced demand. I mentioned that mortgage rates were the key to the stimulus of demand. Let me go to my forecast. I've got exactly what I need for a forecast here. I have a crystal ball. And it works pretty well. I've had it for some years. It was an anniversary present from my wife, I think on our first anniversary. And it enables me to tell you that mortgage rates are going up. One reason is globally, interest rates are going to rise. Long-term interest rates are going to rise. Long-term interest rates around the world are related to global demand for credit and global supply of savings. Global demand for credit, global supply of savings. And as a result of these factors, as the global economy is improving, we're getting more demand for credit, pushing interest rates up. But when we start talking about interest rates in the US, in contrast to globally, folks in the bond market are thinking, what is U.S. inflation going to be? Inflation expectations are rising. My own forecast is that we will see 4% interest rates sometime, mortgage interest rates sometime next year in 2022, getting to 5% mortgage rates. Incidentally, you can take this with a grain of salt if you wish. I think that interest rates will go up more than my fellow economists do. Most of the other people who make interest rates forecasts are not as aggressive in these interest rate increases. So if you're thinking about making a big financial bet, you might want to check out some other voices. But I believe we're going to see higher interest rates. And with those higher interest rates, people who had been thinking, okay, we're almost ready to buy that house, are going to find that, okay, it's over. The opportunity is over. The cheap interest rates have left. And in addition, the people who were closest to being ready already bought a house. So I believe we'll see declining demand for lumber and plywood, along with a little bit of increased supply in 2022, maybe the second half of 2022, and on into 2023. So if you're rubbing your chin, wondering whether to build that deck this year, you might be better off taking a vacation instead and waiting a couple of years. Then I think that we will see plywood and lumber prices coming down. Let me end by talking about myself. I'm the consultant who connects the dots between the economy and business. I put out a monthly newsletter that you can get for free, along with my 5,000 closest friends. It's handwritten, it's charts of economic data like you've seen here with handwritten comments. And if you will text the word econ to 42828, you'll get it. Enter that number as if it were a phone number, even though it's only 5 digits, 42828, and send the word econ to me, and you'll get on the mailing list. This presentation today is based on an article I wrote for Forbes.com. I will link to that in the show notes below. I write regularly for Forbes.com, and if you get my newsletter, you'll see links to all of those articles. I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment, and I look forward to having you watch my next video.